Okay, so you've sent us a ton of stuff about how to build this like seriously strong cybersecurity setup, one that's always watching.
Right.
So think of this as our like mission control briefing.
Perfect.
We're going to pull out the absolute key stuff from all of this so you can get a clear picture of what it actually takes to build this kind of always-on digital fortress.
Exactly. And whether you're, someone who lives in the tech world day in and day out, or you're just trying to grasp the fundamentals,
Yeah.
our goal is to give you a clear and engaging um, overview.
Right.
And we understand you want to learn how to build a strong defense, not just with single tools, but with a truly integrated strategy that's constantly monitoring and protecting your digital world.
Yeah, and that idea of everything working together, that's absolutely crucial. All this information you sent talks about a security ecosystem, and that's like the foundation.
Yeah.
It's
Go.
almost like this well-coordinated team where everyone's got their specific role to play, but they rely on each other, right, to get that win.
Okay.
And from what we can see, this ecosystem, it's built on these essential components.
Yeah.
We're talking about protecting each device, endpoint protection,
Mhm.
securing how everything's connected, the pathways, network security, identity and access management, making sure the right people get to the right things.
Right.
Staying ahead of the game with threat intelligence,
Yeah.
knowing exactly what to do if something happens, incident response,
Yeah.
and of course, making sure everything's aligned with the rules, compliance, and governance.
Exactly. Yeah. And before we even start thinking about specific tools and software, that initial groundwork, the preparation, it's absolutely vital.
Right.
The material really stresses those first steps, really getting to know your organization from the inside out, and also getting a grip on what kind of threats are lurking out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this involves looking at your risk profile, like what are your most valuable digital assets and where are the potential weaknesses?
Right, yeah.
Then you need to consider how that stacks up against the current threat landscape. What sorts of attacks are relevant to your industry and the way you operate?
Yeah.
And at the heart of all this are your business goals.
Mm-hmm.
What are you ultimately trying to achieve, and how can security support those goals instead of getting in the way?
It's not just about, slapping on security tools. It's about having that very clear understanding of what you're actually defending and why it matters.
Right.
And as we understand it, right, our specific security needs, they'll become much clearer once we've got that foundation.
Exactly.
So we need to define the what are we mainly trying to prevent data breaches, catch unusual activity super early, or ensure we're ticking all the boxes for the legal and industry standards.
Yes.
And then comes the what exactly needs this protection? Are we talking about everything from our main servers to the laptops everyone's using every day? And then there's regulatory compliance. That's really important.
Yeah.
Whether it's GDPR for data privacy, IPR for health information, or PCI DSS for credit card details. These rules, they lay out very specific security requirements that need to be built into our systems from the get-go.
Yes, absolutely.
And of course, we can't forget the practical stuff. What kind of budget and resources do we actually have to make all of this happen?
Exactly, yeah. Once we have that solid foundation, we can start thinking about how to actually design the cybersecurity infrastructure.
Okay.
And there are three key principles that should guide this: modularity, scalability, and resilience. Modularity means building the system in a way that you've got these kind of self-contained parts.
Mm-hmm.
So if one part needs an upgrade or has a problem, it doesn't take down the entire defense system.
Right.
Scalability is all about thinking ahead, making sure you can grow and adapt as your organization changes and the threats change.
Uh-huh.
And then there's resilience. That's about making sure your systems can withstand attacks and failures, minimizing disruptions as much as possible.
Right. Okay. Let's start looking at some of these individual parts.
Okay.
Let's begin with endpoint security. This is like having a guard at every single entry point, protecting each device, right?
Yep.
The material really emphasizes advanced endpoint detection and response EDR solutions.
What?
What sets these apart from those like more traditional security measures we're probably already familiar with?
Well, what's really interesting here is this shift from just reacting to threats we already know about to proactively searching for anything that looks suspicious.
Okay. Yeah.
So think of traditional antivirus software and firewalls
Sure.
as the first locks on your door, still important, of course.
Right.
Application whitelisting, that's where you only allow certain approved programs to run, right?
Yeah.
That adds another layer of security. It's like having a really strict guest list.
Okay.
But EDR goes further. It's like having a security camera that's constantly recording what's happening on each device, looking for any unusual patterns that could be a sign of an attack. It's not just about recognizing bad programs. It's about spotting behavior that's just off.
Mhm.
And one thing the material really stresses is that none of this works well if you don't keep your systems patched and updated.
Yeah, okay.
It's like making sure all the windows in your house are properly secured. If you leave vulnerabilities open, attackers will find a way in.
That makes perfect sense. So we've got individual devices protected,
Right.
but what about the digital highways where all the data travels?
Yeah.
That's where network security comes into play.
Exactly.
The sources talk about next generation firewalls and intrusion detection prevention systems.
Yep.
What are the big improvements with these next gen tools?
Well, if we think about it, traditional firewalls, they were mainly about controlling traffic based on simple things like which port it was using.
Okay.
Next generation firewalls, or NGFWs, they bring in more intelligence.
Uh-huh.
They can actually examine the traffic itself, see which applications are in use, and they often tap into threat intelligence feeds to block known bad actors. Intrusion detection systems, or IDS, are like silent alarms on your network. They pick up suspicious activity. And intrusion prevention systems, or IPS, they take it a step further.
Mm-hmm.
They'll actually step in and block those threats.
Right. Okay.
And then there's network segmentation, really important.
Yeah.
Imagine dividing your network into these different zones. If an attacker gets into one zone, segmentation stops them from easily getting into other more sensitive areas. It's like having internal firewalls.
Right. I see.
And then lastly, encrypting data while it's being transmitted using protocols like TLS, that's like putting your valuable information in a secure, locked container during transport.
Let's move on to who has access to what. Identity and access management, or IAM.
Okay.
The material strongly recommends multi-factor authentication. Why is that such a crucial safeguard these days?
It highlights a really important point about one of the biggest vulnerabilities in security.
Yeah.
Stolen passwords. Just having a password these days, it's usually not enough. Multi-factor authentication, or MFA, it adds that extra layer of security by making users prove who they are in at least two different ways. Something they know, like a password, something they have, like a code sent to their phone, or something they are, like a fingerprint.
Uh-huh.
That makes it so much harder for attackers to break in, even if they get hold of a password.
Right.
And then implementing role-based access control, or RBAC, that's another important idea. It ensures that users only have the permissions they need for their specific jobs, following the principle of least privilege.
Yeah, okay.
It's like giving an employee the keys they need for their specific department, not the master key to the whole building.
Right.
And the mention of user behavior analytics, or UBA, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It involves learning what's normal for users and then flagging anything that deviates from that pattern, which could point to a compromised account or someone acting maliciously from within.
Okay, so we're building these layers of defense.
Right.
But how do we stay informed about all the new threats that are constantly emerging?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's where threat intelligence comes in.
Exactly.
What kind of information are we talking about here, and how do we use it?
Well, the valuable thing about threat intelligence is that it's proactive. It's about gathering, analyzing, and sharing information about current and potential threats.
Uh-huh.
This includes details about known attackers, their typical methods, and indicators of compromise, like clues that a system might have been breached.
Right, like little red flags.
Exactly. Subscribing to threat intelligence fees gives you a constant stream of this up-to-date information.
Okay.
And SIEM tools, which we mentioned earlier, Splunk, IBM QRadar, and Microsoft Sentinel, they're essential for making sense of all this data.
Okay.
Think of them as a central hub that gathers logs from all your security systems, puts the pieces together, and helps you spot threats you might miss otherwise.
Right, yeah.
And the use of machine learning and AI takes this even further, enabling predictive threat analysis. We're essentially trying to anticipate attacks based on past events and emerging patterns.
Even with all these preventative measures in place, security incidents can still happen.
Unfortunately.
That's why having a well-thought-out incident response plan is so vital.
Definitely.
What are the most important elements of an effective plan?
A good incident response plan is like having a solid emergency action plan for your digital environment.
Okay.
It needs to clearly define roles and responsibilities, who does what when something goes wrong.
Right.
It should also outline the steps for identifying an incident, containing it, getting rid of the threat, and recovering your systems and data.
Right.
But a plan's only useful if you know how to use it, which is why the material stresses regular drills and simulations.
Okay, yeah.
These are like fire drills for your digital team,
Right.
helping them find weaknesses in the plan and making sure everyone knows what to do under pressure.
Right.
And the material also touches on automated response mechanisms, which hints at the power of SOR tools. These can automate some of those initial actions when an incident is detected, leading to a faster and more efficient response.
After any security incident, or even just as a general good practice to avoid data loss, having a strong backup and recovery strategy is essential.
Absolutely, yeah.
What are the absolute must-haves for a robust backup approach?
Well, it really comes down to making sure your business can keep running, right?
Right.
A strong backup strategy isn't just about making copies of your data. It's also about storing those backups securely,
Mhm.
ideally offsite, to protect against physical disaster.
Yeah.
But maybe even more important than the backup itself is being able to get that data back quickly and reliably. The material really emphasizes the need to regularly test your recovery procedures.
Yeah, makes sense.
You don't want to find out during a ransomware attack or a major system crash that your backups are corrupt, or that it takes days to restore everything. Tools like Veeam, Acronis, and Rubrik offer solutions for managing backups, but the key is to have a well-defined plan and to test it thoroughly.
We've talked about all these security layers, but our deep dive specifically mentions round-the-clock monitoring.
Right.
Why is this constant vigilance so important?
Well, the thing is, cyber threats don't take breaks.
Right.
Round-the-clock monitoring gives you real-time visibility into what's happening with your security so you can spot and react to any suspicious activity quickly. The core of this is often a centralized monitoring platform, and as we talked about earlier, SIEM tools are central to this.
Uh,
They gather and correlate security data from your entire digital environment, giving you a unified view.
okay.
Setting up dashboards and alerts is crucial. They help you quickly identify suspicious patterns or high-priority events that need your immediate attention.
To watch these dashboards and respond to alerts 204/7, the material mentions a Security Operations Center, a SOC.
Right.
What exactly does a SOC do, and what are the different ways an organization can set one up?
If we think back to the security ecosystem, a SOC is like its central nervous system.
Okay.
It's a team of security analysts who are always monitoring security events, analyzing potential threats, and coordinating the response when something happens.
Right.
Building your own SOC can be a big investment. It needs skilled people and a specialized infrastructure.
Hmm.
For organizations where that's not possible, there's the option of using a managed security service provider,
Yeah.
or MSSP. They offer round-the-clock monitoring and response, using their own expertise and infrastructure.
Okay.
Whether you go in-house or outsourced, the main goal is to have trained professionals actively watching over your digital world.
The material also talks about automated alerts and response and using SOR tools like Phantom and Demisto.
Yes.
How do these automation features make the monitoring process more effective?
It's a question of efficiency and speed, really. In today's threat landscape, which is constantly evolving, trying to analyze and respond to every potential threat manually just isn't feasible.
Right.
Automated alerts ensure that security teams are immediately notified when critical events happen, allowing them to investigate quickly. SOR tools take this a step further. They automate those repetitive tasks and streamline the response process. For example, if there's a known malicious activity detected, a SOAR platform might isolate the affected device, block the attacker's IP address, and notify the security team all automatically.
Wow.
That frees up analysts to focus on more complex threats.
So beyond just reacting to known threats, there's also this proactive approach, threat hunting.
Right, yes.
What exactly is involved in threat hunting?
The interesting thing about threat hunting is that it's about actively searching for threats that may have slipped past your initial defenses, rather than just waiting for alarms to go off.
Okay.
Threat hunting involves analysts proactively looking for those indicators of compromise, the clues that a system might be infected, and searching for vulnerabilities within the network.
Uh-huh.
They often use behavioral analytics to spot unusual patterns of activity that might not trigger those standard alerts, but could still be a sign of something bad happening. It's a much more in-depth and investigative approach to security monitoring.
We've covered a lot of ground with technology and processes, but the material also highlights the importance of fostering a culture of security.
Definitely.
Why is the human element so crucial to get right?
Well, if we think about the security ecosystem again, the people in your organization are a vital part of it.
Right.
Even the most advanced security systems can be undermined by human error.
Yeah.
Employees are often the first line of defense. Their awareness and behavior can have a huge impact on the overall security.
Absolutely.
Regular training and awareness programs are so important for teaching everyone about common threats, like phishing emails, social engineering tactics, and unsafe browsing habits.
Uh-huh.
Promoting a culture of accountability and vigilance means encouraging everyone to take security seriously, to understand their role in protecting sensitive information,
Right.
and creating an environment where people feel comfortable reporting anything suspicious without being afraid of getting into trouble. That's really important for catching problems early.
And just as threats are constantly evolving, our defenses need to keep pace, right?
Totally.
The material emphasizes continuous improvement of the ecosystem.
Yes.
What does that look like in practice?
It's about understanding that cybersecurity is an ongoing process. Continuous improvement means regularly assessing how well your security is working and adapting to new threats and vulnerabilities.
Okay.
Conducting regular security audits helps you find those weaknesses in your systems and processes. Penetration testing, that's where ethical hackers simulate real-world attacks that can expose vulnerabilities you might not find otherwise. Staying up to date with the latest threats, security tools, and best practices is essential. And importantly, learning from any security incidents, even the near misses, and using those lessons to improve your policies and procedures, that's how you build a more resilient security posture over time.
For many organizations these days, cloud services are a big part of their IT setup. How does security in the cloud fit into this overall picture?
What's interesting about cloud security is that it's a shared responsibility.
Okay. Cloud providers, they take care of the security of their infrastructure, the underlying systems.
Right.
But you, as the user, are responsible for securing your own data and applications in the cloud.
Okay.
So that means making sure your cloud providers meet your organization's security needs and using cloud-specific security tools like AWS Guard Duty or Azure Security Center. For organizations that use a combination of on-premises and cloud resources, a hybrid approach to security is essential to ensure seamless protection across both environments.
To make this all a bit more concrete, the material provides a list of example tools and technologies in different security areas.
Right.
Could you highlight some of these and what they're typically used for?
Sure. For SIEM tools, there's Splunk, IBM QRadar, and Microsoft Sentinel. They're leading platforms for collecting, analyzing security logs, and detecting threats.
Okay.
For endpoint detection and response, solutions like CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, and Microsoft Defender for Endpoint offer advanced protection for individual devices.
For firewalls, Palo Alto Networks, Fortinet, and Checkpoint are well-known vendors for next-generation firewalls. For identity and access management, there are tools like Okta, Ping Identity, and Microsoft Entra ID.
Okay.
For backup and recovery, Veeam, Acronis, and Rubrik are popular choices for protecting data and enabling recovery.
Right.
And for automating incident response, SOR tools like Phantom by Splunk and Demisto by Palo Alto Networks are often used.
Okay.
This is just a selection, of course, but it gives you an idea of the types of tools that are out there.
So finally, how do we actually know if all these cybersecurity measures and all this monitoring are working?
Yeah, that's a good question.
The material talks about metrics for success. What are some key things we should be tracking?
Well, you can't improve what you don't measure, right?
Yeah.
So there are a few key metrics. Mean time to detect, or MTTD, tells you how quickly your security team can spot a security incident. Mean time to respond, or MTTR, measures how long it takes to contain and resolve an incident once it's been detected. Keeping track of the total number of incidents that are detected and successfully resolved gives you a general sense of how effective your security operations are.
Okay.
And lastly, making sure you're compliant with regulations, making sure you're meeting those standards and avoiding potential penalties, that's crucial.
Right.
By tracking these metrics over time, you can see trends, evaluate your security improvements, and make informed decisions about your overall strategy.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that building a secure cybersecurity infrastructure with round-the-clock monitoring, it's not a one-off project.
Definitely not.
It's a continuous and comprehensive commitment.
It is. It requires a careful blend of technology, well-defined processes, and, maybe most importantly, a dedicated security-aware team within your organization.
Absolutely. And on that note, here's a final thought for you to consider. Given that cyber threats are always changing, how will you make sure that your approach to building the security ecosystem stays flexible and forward-thinking? How will you adapt your defenses and stay ahead of those potential attacks? It's a challenge that requires constant learning and a real willingness to evolve.
definitely.
And that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for listening.